Shawn Hollmer, June of 1964.
Were you born in Crestone?
I lived in Crestone. The hospital was in Del Norte,
Okay.
so that's actually where I was born.
That's where Johnny Hughes was born. His mom went over there.
I guess that was the place everybody went, but it was the Del Norte Hospital, so I don't know. I don't have any saying it, so that's where it was.
And who were your parents?
Well,
Oh,
Mom was a single parent, so my mom, which is a school teacher in Pueblo, but my grandma raised me Toots Hollmer, and then Mom would come back on the weekends, and so I was raised with my grandma actually, most of the time.
I've been hearing about Toots.
Toots, yeah. She was a tough lady.
To say the least.
Yeah.
I gave him stories about Toots.
Yeah, she wasn't afraid to speak her opinion. But she went through hard times, depression. Her husband, my grandpa, died when I think Mom was four years old. Maybe she raised 3 kids without anything else than shooting deer and cleaning houses, what she could get by,
That's right.
So
Wait. I'm gonna wait till he's loud and less. Can you say that again, that she was raising kids on her own?
yeah, she had 3 kids. Jim Hollmer, who's in town, and then Tom Hollmer, and then my mom, Mariana.
Oh, okay.
Is your mom still living?
Yeah.
She is. Is she in Pueblo?
She spends the summers in Gunnison. Yes, she retired school teacher,
Okay.
second grade for 37 years.
I'm going
or
to
something.
kill him.
So,
I didn't.
but
There I did.
but I don't know, is it doing its thing or not?
It is. And it's,
So my grandma, probably hear this story from somebody else too, but my grandpa worked on the ranch, and Alfred Collins he owned it, and in fact my uncle's middle name is Alfred from him, because I hear bad stories about Alfred Collins, but my grandma must have thought a lot of him, because when my grandpa got sick, he took all the ranch hands to Denver to donate blood to and gave them a place to live for several years, and so I think he was good to his people.
Yeah.
That's I've heard bad things, but I've also heard some good things. So
he's the one I heard that was friends with Teddy Roosevelt.
could have been. He was he traveled all over the world and went on safaris and that kind of stuff. So
I'd like to ask something that I heard, Shawn, and it's a ranch story. I heard one of the cowboys, and this must have been in the 70s, I would say. No, it had to be in the 70s because it happened down at the inn. I heard one of the cowboys rode his horse into the Baca, the inn at the Baca at the time, the dining table. Do you remember?
I remember the story. I think that was Hank Chafin. I think he ran the stables. Is that name ring a bell to you?
Yeah. I mean, I did not know it happened before my time.
It was either Hank Chafin or one of the cowboys at the ranch, or
Yeah.
that worked on the stables. I'm
They
sorry.
rode into the Baca dining room, and my former husband was so jealous of that, and he said, someday I'm going to do that same thing. He never did. But nevertheless, I just wanted to see if
I
I
heard
was
that
right
story.
on with that
So I
story.
would have been pretty young then, but I did hear the story too.
Yeah.
So.
And Shawn, would you please explain about the fire wagon that Crestone had?
When I was a kid, we had it was about a 1941 GMC. It was a military truck, and it was a town hall, and now it's like the town's utility building right here on the bottom, Carbonate. It's right in the middle of the street. And that truck sat there, probably military surplus, and then there was an ambulance set beside it. Yeah, I actually had to pull the fire truck out to get the ambulance out. And of course, the fire truck went away in the early 80s when they built us that firehouse. And the ambulance went away before, and Elaine and Steve's, dad, Bob Sizemore, bought it. And I think Steve McDowell still got the car. He liked to restore stuff.
Did you used to drive the ambulance?
No, I was too young. But, it took a few of the people in town out, but it wasn't a quick deal, and nobody had any qualifications other than driving to the hospital.
What would happen when they had a fire? I remember when one of the cabins burned down and they were
That was
taking it
our
all
old
apart.
house.
Huh?
That was the house I grew up in.
No.
Where Bobby Troutman lived?
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in that house.
You grew up in that house? Oh my gosh, and that fire there?
Bobby left too big a fire in the wood stove. And
Yeah, yeah,
no, we lived down there. We lived right down there up from the bridge.
okay,
And we rented it. We didn't own it.
okay,
And then Tommy bought this house for Grandma up here.
okay.
So, but
You
yeah,
grew up in that house?
until I was like 5.
Oh my gosh.
And
And I remember the fire, and I remember that the insulation was all old newspapers, remember?
it was a cold house.
Yeah, and it was all insulated with newspapers, and some of the newspapers we got out, you know, before they caught on fire. And, I mean, we're talking old newspapers. Do
Right.
you know when that cabin was built?
It was
Yeah.
in the boom probably, I think. You know, back in the late
Yeah.
early 1900s, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So,
Oh my gosh. And didn't Toots's, your grandpa, you know, it would be your great grandpa, didn't he build the church?
Grandma's grandpa, Grandpa Barnes.
Yeah, okay.
And they actually built that log church to live there, and there was another house between this building and the log church that washed out in the flood of 1911.
Okay.
They built them buildings, and then they homesteaded where the golf course is.
Okay.
And then they moved down there, and right where the big tree is, just you know, where the pump is at the golf course, that's where the house was. And
So that's a willow or a cottonwood? That's a willow tree, right?
cottonwood tree.
That's a cottonwood tree?
Cottonwood
That
tree.
thing's huge.
And so they homesteaded there until they both passed away, and then my grandma's brother Sam sold it to the ranch. But there was a second homestead in the building where the mitigation pit is. That's where grandma's brother Clarence had a house. So everything that's like the camper village and stuff was his. There was 2 homesteads together, so he got that one, and both of them ended up with the ranch. And then when Baca came, it was them. But grandma always, and this isn't your questions, but when the Baca first started, do you remember when they dynamited on the hill?
Yes.
Because grandma remembered,
Oh, yes.
because they were miners, and she remembers them carrying nitroglycerin, bottles of nitroglycerin, and burying them on the hill behind the house, and pack them in sawdust, and they waxed the lids, and she, till the day she died, she swore that's still buried there, and
Oh my gosh.
Which hill?
right behind the golf course, that hill right there. So they dynamited, they set off some blasts to try to maybe, you know, get it to go, but maybe the bottle leaked or whatever, but she swore that was there.
Oh my gosh.
So, but
Yeah. I told him yesterday, and just ever so briefly, I told him yesterday about when Bob Harris lived next door to your grandma. And Bob and I went over to meet Toots. And she came out on the front porch with her gun.
did you really?
And I said, "Hi, Toots." And no, I called her Mrs. Hollmer at that point.
Right.
Because she was.
She was good. She's a really good person, but you had to get.
You had to get to know her, and through my former husband, I got to know her because they were both. Michael's family was the same in Aspen as Toots was here, so he spoke the language, you know, the mining language and all of that. So Bob Harris and I went over to meet her properly. You know, he said, "I really want to meet her," and I said, "Okay." And she came out with a gun. You can just picture her on her porch. And she said, "You come one step closer and I'm going to shoot this gun." And so Bob opened the gate for me to walk in, and she shot her gun.
Did she really?
She shot it up in the
Yeah.
air, you know. And so we left.
We-
But oh, I loved it so much.
But you know, when I was growing up and the Baca first started, a lot of the old timers were, you know, there's like, you know, the leftovers from the mining era, and it changed. But the first people that come in kind of said, "Yeah, Crestone, you're nothing, and we're going to change everything." You know, there was a gate at the Schley entrance. There was a gate, and
It was a gated community.
and I couldn't go in there. Grandma couldn't go in there. We could not drive in the Baca. And if you had a little sticker, I still got a Jeep up there. It's got one. If you had a little sticker, you could go, or you called ahead and they called down there. But Grandma worked at the independent mine, and she always wanted to go up there. So the gatekeeper was Harvey. The first time I ever drove in the Baca, I can remember the day.
There was a guy sitting there?
He stayed. In that flower, it's what a flower bed now,
It's
it was a
yeah,
building.
It was a gated community, not when I was here.
But Harvey snuck us in, and we drove up to the mine, and but it was kind of like, I don't know. But like when I was a kid, you couldn't. All the other kids could go fish at the lake, or they could go, but Crestone kids couldn't.
Oh my gosh.
So that is like, I remember one time.
Oh,
I was with somebody else. It's, oh, he's my kid. So but it's kind of like it changed, But there's a lot of that feeling that stayed for a long time.
Of course.
Like, well, screw you people.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, that is terrible. I had no idea.
Oh yeah, they didn't. We wasn't the community. We was the outsiders, and they was the newcomers, and we didn't have the same rights and privileges,
Oh my gosh, Shawn, I had no idea about that.
Yeah. So that's where a lot of that came
The
from.
resentment came
Sure.
from, yeah.
I mean, if people ever wondered, that's the old timers that's hanging on. That it's like the Baca and Crestone and everything the same.
Oh my gosh.
So, and I can remember that. And of course, I worked for them.
I want to
so
ask you about the telephones. I was told when I came to the Baca by my friend Lynn Lindsay, who was with the Aspen Institute. She said, Whitney, this is a place where the telephone for the Baca, to have a telephone, it went through a switchboard at the Moffett Hotel.
Yeah, it was. It was Penny Sands. I went to school with her. It was her mom, and I can't remember. And she was the switchboard operator. Penny Sands was the daughter, so the lady must have been, last name was Sands.
Okay.
And she had the switchboard was there by the Moffett.
Yeah, by the
park.
Moffett Hotel.
Oh, yeah, kind of. Well, I thought it was by the, no, because that's what the name is. I think you're right. I think it is by the.
Okay.
But anyway,
I was
it was in
told
Moffett.
it was in the Moffett
think you're right.
Hotel, and that there was not for years. Do you remember when you got a telephone? And it was always, I was told, a party line.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah.
You didn't ever call anybody in the middle of the night because, just like probably all phones, yours was 2 rings, or a short and a long. So everybody, like 5 other people in town's phone rang if you called them at midnight, and then of course everybody, what the heck? And then everybody was listening. Everybody was listening.
It was through a switchboard at the Moffett Hotel. It wasn't, where you dial and you get the person. It's at the switchboard. The switchboard connects you.
Yeah.
And 5 people's phones would ring?
Well, I think there might have only been 3. That's probably exaggeration. But yeah, you had several people on your line, and I think on our line was Bill and Gladys Sizemore and Earl and Margaret Williams.
Yeah.
And then it was me and Grandma.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it was.
Well, do you remember about when it changed over to where we got telephones?
No, we didn't have a phone for a long, long time. So I think when we finally got a phone, it was the party line. It never was. You had to get the operator or the switchboard operator. So because we didn't have a phone, we didn't have one in that house, and we didn't have one up here for a long time.
Okay.
Grandma was a holdout for that. Was a luxury you probably didn't need.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
Can I go back to that gated community? So you were, what was that, the 70s?
Mm-hmm.
And so you were born in 64?
64.
So you were like a young kid in the 70s, and up until then, you had access to all that?
No. Up till then, it was ranch. So you had to talk to the foreman. It was probably Chuck Wolf at the time for, and you'd have to have a reason to go in there. It'd be like asking Gary Boyce to go in there to hunt or fish or look for arrowheads or, and of course they didn't let everybody go in there. Because they did the same thing. So I can't say that I was ever in the Baca until that day that Harvey let us in with the cake.
And then they sold, and the Baca started, and they started developing it, and what some kids...
Well, no, the gated community was, in the 60s, or Arizona Land and Cattle Company sold
It was it's my understanding, it was in the early 70s, and, the AZL got the land grant, and 12 Mile Square, it was a Spanish land grant, and the corporation took out 10,000 acres where the Baca is now to develop it. and then the remainder of it was all the ranch.
Sure.
And so, but the Baca Corporation was the ranch, and the ranch was the Baca
Right.
Corporation. It was all one at that time.
But why, but we couldn't get in there before, and we couldn't, I mean, there's no reason to.
Yeah.
I mean, we had to, I mean, I'm sure Chuck could let you, but why, we didn't ask. But then when it started as a subdivision, it was gated for several years. I don't know how many years it was gated. And then they got rid of that, of course.
Were there kids that lived in the Baca that?
Very few.
Very
Most of them are retired. Most of them are military, actually.
Most of them were military, yeah.
So Steve McDowell and I were only two kids in town forever. I mean, ever and ever. And it was the same age.
When I moved here, I remember you and Steve, I think you may have just graduated from Moffett, maybe.
Mhm.
I'm not
Okay.
sure. I moved here in '80, so.
No, I was 2 years before I graduated.
Okay. And you and Steve were the only kids around, you
When-
know.
When I was growing up, Steve and I had what's called a jitterbug. And a jitterbug is an old, what they use in the hay meadows to rake the hay. It's what they do is they get an old 1920 or 1930 model vehicle, and this is just a cab, part of a cab, and then they'd make it for farm equipment. But Steve had a Model A and I had an old Chevy, and we would go around town. I was 14 years old. Well, Johnny was the sheriff.
Oh.
And we gave him awful much grief. We tried not to drive him in town. We tried to drive him out in, Penn and stuff. But he took his job pretty serious.
Yeah, I asked him, I said, how was that being sheriff? And he said that some kids were hot rodding around town.
Probably us.
Yeah.
Well, or throwing snowballs.
So no other kids your age were here?
No. There was a few, when, Hannah's kids moved in down there that, they was about the same age, but nobody in town forever, until maybe high school, junior high, then there was some kids, but the younger years, it was Steve and I, that was it.
Did you go to Alamos and Salida or any of that stuff?
No. I probably made it to Alamos twice or three times a year. Grandma was pretty, that was a waste. If somebody could get you something in town, give them the money and let them do it, because we don't have any reason to go waste money to drive to town.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, what kind of vehicle did you have in those days? What did Toots have, or
She had the old Scout, which is
Okay.
like a 64,
Okay,
65
okay.
Scout or something.
Okay.
But she went down to the post office. Back then, the post office was a big deal. The mail come up like at 1 o'clock, and all the ladies in town, Grandma and Margaret Williams and Fernie Vanderpool and Lee Hutchinson, they'd all sit in the little lobby and wait for the mail to get up, and they'd all visit. That was a big deal. Remember that?
Absolutely. I remember 2 o'clock is if you wanted to really get your mail, unless Toots Hollmer was standing in front of my mailbox.
Did she stand in front of it?
Yes, she did. She wouldn't let me in. And I remember there was no real reason for us to go to the post office before 2 o'clock because we would not get our mail.
Right.
And
Yeah, that was a gathering point.
it was
for the ladies in town.
well, it still is.
Yeah.
It's just different now.
Right.
I mean, you and I see each other at the post
Right.
office and talk about who died.
Right, I know, unfortunately, yeah.
Do you know when or why they took the gate down?
I don't. I suppose, they had to pay somebody full-time to be
Yeah,
there.
that's crazy. And then you could go.
Then you could go in, right?
The sales, I just want to interject this because I think it may give some clarity. What they did in the early days, and I read about this, I was not here at the time, but when they started developing the Baca, what they did was put up little sales offices all around the country at military bases. And when people came out to go on leave, they had a desk and a little sales office, but it was an outside thing, just outside the gate. And $30 down, $30 a month for 30 years, you could get a piece of land at the Baca. And then if you really wanted to go see your land, and this was all military, and if you want to go see your land, you can stay 2 days at the Baca and get a crock pot or something like that. And that was their method of marketing. You know, that's how they did it. And that's how the Baca got so many. When I first came here, I was amazed at the number of military in the Baca. And that's when I learned the story of why there were so many military in the Baca. My guess is that, and this is a guess, that you know, trying to exclude other people did not do well with marketing, and that's why they took down the gate. That would be my guess. But when I came here, there was no gate. So between
Something.
71, 70, whatever. And when Lynn came here in 78, there was no gate. So between 71 and 78, the gate came down, I guess.
And I don't know where the building went. It might have been an addition on the store, because I know that
Yeah.
there was the back. Across from the entrance to the Sleighs in that field, there was a realty office, the George Jubb Realty. And that was actually, I know that was part of Kurt's addition. But
What did you do after high school?
I went to college, and then I worked at the POA part-time, and then I'm still there.
College,
In Adams State,
Adams State.
degree in biology and environmental science.
Oh, shit.
So, but yeah, I worked there. I did spend one summer working on the ranch, you know, so I guess there's been one.
Oh yeah, and I want to ask more about that. So it's Alfred Collins, and did you know him personally?
No,
Is he before you?
before me, long time. You know, Alfred Collins had, I mean, he was, the ranch was known for these Herefords that, there was one of them in the Depression or right after that sold for $70,000, the bull.
Oh, my God.
I've got a lot of literature, actually I got quite a bit of literature on the Collinses, you know, because, let me get this straight here. Alfred Collins' stepson was Harry Glenn, and Harry Glenn married Eula Glenn, and that's where Larry and Sandy are at, that house there right now.
Eula, I was trying to.
And Eula, you know, we had, you know, I went down there and mowed Eula's lawn and damn black cows, you know, because he was in that Hereford, you know, it had to be, and he cared a lot for the ranch and he cared a lot for them Herefords, you know, but they had a big, dispersal sale, and they sold, it was a big deal, a huge big deal. And I don't know who bought it after that, after the ranch, but
And can you
after Collins.
elaborate on that story you said about was it your uncle or somebody getting sick and what?
My grandpa was a ranch hand, and they all lived down where the wildlife refuge is, the office is. I believe there was a house right before the creek on the east side of the road, and they were living there. And he got sick, and he had to go to Denver to the hospital, and it was bad. He died from it. But Alfred Collins sent all the ranch hands, took him to Denver, paid for it, and they donated blood, and because he was
How
helpful.
old was your grandpa? Do you
You know, he's older than Grandma, and so I think it was in the 40s. I think he was
Okay.
40 years old or
And
something.
that's
40s.
Toots' husband.
Husband, yeah.
And what was his name?
Harry.
Harry. Harry.
Hollmer.
Hollmer.
Uh-huh.
So she was raising kids.
After that, Grandma raised all 3 kids,
Wow.
you know. So,
Plus you.
plus me, yeah,
Yeah.
later on, plus me.
Elaine talks about how fierce and strong the women here were and are, but in that generation.
I think they were tough. You know, the ladies that were in town, you know, that their husbands passed away, they made it, and they were tough. I mean, they were calloused.
Did they ever do any mining in any other of the mines, Shawn, except the Independent? Did they?
You mean anybody?
Anybody?
Oh yeah, because I actually talked to a guy yesterday that's building over on Cottonwood. There's a mill, you know, they built a railroad through town,
Yeah.
and it went to the Independent mine, and then it turned around to Cottonwood, and they got it built about the time that the Independent played out, and they tore it out and went out. But right where it turned around, there's a mill site, which was Dickman's Mill, and that took care of all the independent miners, because the independent, I know it's independent, but the big mine where the Shume is, didn't mill anybody else's ore. It was this mine, so people would bring it in and for a share, you know, or either a share or they'd charge it per ton. I don't know, but there was a town there, Cottonwood, and that's,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Do you remember the train?
No.
No,
That
that was long before.
I don't even
you-
remember the depot. The depot where
Okay.
Scott Johnson lived burnt down
Yeah,
in the
I
50s.
knew that the depot was where Scott lived.
And that was like the 50s it burnt.
Oh, in the 50s, okay.
So that was before me too. And then the Grant building, you know where Mary Lowers lives?
Yeah.
That was the big, huge brick Grant building. That was, you know, when, like in the Collins era, they had this showcase, you know, the built, that was where the offices were, it was there. It was a huge 2-story brick building. I've seen pictures, but not anything else.
And it burned down?
It was brick. I think they tore it down.
Ah.
So, and there's still part of the, well, the foundation, I don't know, they may have covered it in, but that was there.
What was your first job working for the POA?
Landscaping. I mean, I worked, when the Aspen Institute came, which is where the college is now, and the Desert Sage and all that, that was the Aspen Institute, and I was working there early on, because they, you know, made it all and put the berms in and all that stuff.
Did they treat you good?
Yeah.
Were you conflicted to be a townie working on the?
No, by that time it was I mean, it was kind of, it wasn't us and them as much. You know, when I was in high school, it was, we was allowed to do the things that other kids could do at that point in time.
You were welcome because the labor pool in the area was so small. And they had to, you know, they hired a bunch of people from Alamosa, you know, and they were all stoned by the time they came up here to do work.
Mm-hmm.
So the Institute was really happy to have local people, you know, working. And so it was a gratitude thing as far as hiring locals, you know, that's what they wanted to do.
The first workforce, like when the Baca first started, you know, that Pat Tracy was the golf course manager, the grounds, and he hired a bunch of the guys around town. Well, Grandma always called them hippies, you know. Well, I'd probably take a hippie over what we got sometimes these days. I mean, they were just down to earth, you know. They'd come over and buy. Grandma made bread.
I remember.
She always cooked bread in Crisco cans, so it was always, you know, had the
Coffee cans.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And she'd always sell them bread. They always come over, and they were all good. They were good people. They were just,
Yeah.
you know. You remember Glenn Budd and
Yeah,
Was it-
and Hank Brasby
oh yeah,
and his wife
And
and their
kids.
son. Yeah.
three kids.
Yeah, yeah.
Were they afraid to work?
No, no. Some of them lived in cabins. One of them lived in a cabin up Dimmick,
Yeah.
and no, they were fine. I mean, they were good people.
What house were you living in then?
The one up on Carbonate were I don't know.
The one you're in now?
No, right below that, a couple
The
houses.
one where Renee?
Right by Renee's, right below Renee's house. Yeah.
And then, people like Kizen and Sam, what did they start coming in the 80s? Or, well, Sam came later, but
Yeah, you know,
when did they
Kissen
start building
came in
up
about
around here?
83.
where they're all living now, the Grant. Everybody calls it the Grant. You know, the old timers are going to call everything south of that fence that was the Spanish land grant subdivision was a Grant. Well, the Grant owned over half the town. They owned half the lots. The Aspen Institute come in, and they took over them lots, and they was nice enough to offer it to the, you know, first of all, if it's next to you, you got first chance at it. So, and then if it isn't next, then after that round went, and everybody bought, you know, this property that's been next to him forever, then okay, we're still not going to put it out to the public, but since you're in town, then you cannot buy anything else, and then there was still some left over, and that's where all the stuff up above town, because it was all undeveloped, you know, where Sam is and Kizen is, and they bought that. Huh?
Was my lot owned by Aspen?
I'm sure it was.
Probably, yeah.
It may not have been.
Is
That
that
may have been
what they
Taylor's.
call Hippie Hill?
That might have been Taylor's. There's a Texan that owned a bunch of that, and that may have been his.
I got it from Marge Sanders, but I don't know who she got it from.
Wow.
But so the Aspen Institute, Jill Winslow and I can't remember who else was involved. You maybe, huh?
Oh, definitely. Lynn Lindsay. I mean, we were the ones who lived here,
Mhm.
you know, and Bryce married Jill.
Mhm.
And,
So that's how that got. So Sam didn't.
He couldn't write, yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't his house to start with anyway. That she come with Roy and she died of
it
cancer.
was
Sally,
my
Sally.
understanding
Slowly.
that, when you're talking about that land, that, Strong, did he donate some land for the firehouse or something like that? Do you remember?
The Crestone one?
Uh-huh.
I don't think so. I think Northern Swatch County bought that.
Okay,
That was
okay.
Kent Murray and John Young actually instigated that.
Oh, Kent Murray. Oh my gosh, yes.
Because them two actually had got the firehouse going
Mm-hmm.
before Steve and I jumped on board with
Okay.
that. So, but that really changed the town because it was really, there wasn't hardly any lots that was available because the grant only, you know.
Yeah, I think Kizzen had to like make the road to replace, right?
There was a Jeep road that went up there, but yeah, she pretty much did, you know.
And was that different than having the Baca developed and suddenly there were people like building next to you and stuff?
Well, you know, when the Baca developed, when I was a kid, one thing I can remember is just, we couldn't drive in there, but just, that bulldozer was like a Pac-Man, just, and it's like, when's it gonna stop? You know, I'm very far from an environmentalist, but I was kind of wishing they'd put dozing over trees, because it was, you had this nice, you know, pinyon juniper, and it was just like, I mean, you know, it was just cutting the heart out of the mountain, you know.
For the roads?
The roads, where there wasn't, you know, just imagine where it was all trees, and now it was just destroying, you know, to put, and they had to put the roads, of course, but.
When I first came here, not all of the roads were put in. And Baca Grant Way is still not paved.
Right.
And, I mean, there are some that were really, really rough, you know, still rough, and Dick, I worked for.
Dick Coffey?
No, I worked for Dick.
Morris?
Morris.
Uh-huh.
And he was the engineer and the one who organized the roads to be put in. But there are many more roads now than there were in the 80s.
And there's even gonna be, it was gonna go on down to Dead Man. There's actually still lot signs clear down, but thank goodness they didn't sell it, they held that off. They held off selling that chunk, because Chalet 3 is only a small portion of what it would be. You know, but back to your question though, it didn't change Crestone too much. It did, it opened up a lot of the, you know, up above me and stuff like that, but it's bound to happen. We all broke our piggy banks and bought what we could next to us to get a little sense of buffer zone, but you know, didn't know why we should buy the whole town. We could have, I guess, because it was reasonable. I think for a half block it was $1,500 or something. You know.
Did you ever do town governance?
I was on town board for a while.
Oh yeah? In the, what, in the 80s, 90s?
80s, it must have been 80s. After college, I'm sure. So.
And was that because you wanted to help steer the direction the town was going, or?
I can't remember why I got on it. You know, I'm not a big political person, so I bailed out real quick, I guess. Because it's funny how, you know, you try to make a decision that's best for the town, and I'm sure everybody on the town board knows this, but whoever it affects takes it personal, and they hate you.
Yeah.
You know, you know, it was like, you know, and it was parking there in front of the old roadkill. You know, they were going to take like 15 foot of the street, and I'm like, well, we don't have no parking the way it is, so I voted no, and then of course they realized that, and I had nothing to do with them. It was like, I just think we need more parking, you know. So, but you know how that is.
I voted against the bar.
Yeah.
And I was the only one, and they didn't like me for a minute.
You know, you got to just vote your conscience, and they like you or they don't.
Yeah.
But Crestone growing up was, you know, there's, like I said, there's a lot of old, like the Miss McCormick and Fernie Vanderpool, and when you was a kid, and they seen you a block away, they're laying on that horn, and you get your damn bicycle off the road. I mean, it was, we ain't screwing around, we ain't dodging for you. You're getting the hell off the road, you know. you know, and Mr. Harlan, of course. You know, then there's some really good old people. You know?
Oh yeah.
And old Bill Hutchinson, who's as you're coming in town, it's the big house on the west. He still had his burros from the pack when he's a kid. He used to pack water up to the miners, up Liberty and all that, and Duncan and all them towns. So he still had his little burros, and he'd take them to town and they'd graze.
Oh my gosh.
And Louis Vanderpool worked on the ranch till the day he died, just about, you know. And
When did the ranch stop being a working ranch?
well, it when the government bought it, I guess, because Gary Boyce did it, and you know, even AWDI had a.
And when Tosco owned it, It was still a working ranch.
Mhm.
And,
Willie McDowell worked on the ranch.
did he?
He lived up here.
Oh, right. He,
In
of
that
course, he
little house.
worked on the ranch. I remember that, yeah.
Did you and Steve hang around Willie much when you were growing up?
Some. Willie's a good old guy, but, we was kids and we annoyed him pretty much, I think. But, Willie, that house that he died in, he had to build up the sand, around it or something. And everybody offered to, hey, I got a dump truck or something. He'd get up there on the weekends and had that old Ford Bronco in a trailer, and he'd shovel it full and take it down there and shovel it out. And he did that I bet he did that for 15 years. I mean, just, it was fine with him, But that's what he wanted to do, and that's what he did.
Now, was Steve's siblings, Marcia and
Mylan and Kevin.
Mylan and Kevin, were they growing up with you guys?
Yeah,
Were they a little younger?
they were younger.
They were
Kevin was way younger.
Yeah, Kevin was really young.
Yeah. But yeah, we, like I say, Steve and I had, when we turned of age and got 12 and could drive around town, or 14 or whatever, we had our jitterbugs going, but no, it was fun. Crestone was fun. It was, go around and pick apples and drink pop and, the bears weren't a big deal, so the apple trees wasn't getting torn up. It was a good place to grow up.
Why do you think it's important to do this interview situation?
The history part?
Yeah.
Because our history slips away from us, and people pass away, and it's like, man, I should have went and talked to him about that, And it's very important to talk to everybody you can about and hear their stories. It may be something that's just happened to them over the summer, but it's something they remember, and it's in their mind. Because there's a lot of summer people, because this block over here, the Douglases and Shears and Dales come here in the 40s, early 50s. So they've seen a lot of the town changes as kids, and they're older, 70 years old now, almost all of them. But they've seen the town change, and
Shawn, who was the man from, I think he lived in Monte Vista, who owned the house that Mary...
Jack Toole. Not Mary Meisman, Mary...
That Mary Meisman is...
Jack Toole. Oh, and then it was Messick, Dick Messick.
Yes.
Jack
that's who I
Toole's
was
older than
thinking
that.
of.
So it's Jack Toole.
Oh, it was Toole first and then Messick.
And then
Okay.
there might have been somebody between, but
Yeah.
that was a governor's house.
Yeah.
Johnny Hayes says his dad or grandpa used to caretake that house when somebody official
Mm-hmm.
lived there.
Yeah.
Or
Oh.
I think it was a governor,
Okay.
Yeah.
governor of Colorado or something.
Yeah.
What?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But no, that's why you don't want to let history slip away, because people forget that stuff.
Johnny said he also, I think it was his grandpa used to take his mule and carry fish up to the lakes and stock them
Mm-hmm.
back in the day.
They used to do that. In fact, right below San Isabel Lake, there's two, it'd be hard to find now, but they carried them up in these old milk buckets, that they're about this tall and they got handles on each side. And a lot of times they'd catch, unless they gave you stalkers, they'd go catch them in the creek. And they'd put one on each side of their horse, their mule, and take them out to the lake and dump them in.
That spot up South Crestone where the old trail is, off to the left or the north, they kind of have it shut off now, but you can get up there and there's a piece of steel machinery. It's like the size of a car.
See, that's a patented mine claim.
Okay. Yeah, and Pete Grover.
He owns part of it, yeah. So yeah, that was, the old miners, you get it, they'd give you a mill site by the creek and then the mines, and that was the mill for, and I can't remember the name of the mine, I'm sorry, but there's like 70 acres up there that are private.
How do you think they got that machinery up
There was nothing else, it was a wagon trail, but it was a 2-track.
So mules and men and...
Yep, yeah. It's amazing where they got stuff.
It's amazing. Like you're talking about carrying fish up, I'm like, I don't even like carrying a gallon of water
Right.
up there.
No, they drug, I think, they had them big mule teams and I think they'd drag stuff and it might get 50 yards a day or something.
Right.
Because these old stamp mills, that crush the ore, it's a big, huge steam engine that was the power, and then they had these huge pistons that crushed it, and they would just, the miners pretty soon would say, oh, so-and-so, that mill isn't giving me what I should get. Move it. Them things moved around so much. There's still one on Sand Creek, and it used to be on Liberty, and it probably was on Polk Creek before that. But they'd move them things around.
Do you still go up there
Yeah, yeah.
on foot?
I know the people that own Pole Creek.
I mean, up in the mountains. And
Yeah, oh yeah,
trails.
yeah. Well, I walk, but I have mules,
Uh-huh.
so they pack my stuff, and I don't know. They're rideable, but I don't ride them too much. But yeah, I like to go in the mountains. And, so
Do you spend much time at Pole Creek?
some,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. The fella, he grew up with my mother, Larry Mitchell, and he's getting elderly, so he likes people to go up there and make a presence, because the Forest Service Trail goes through his property, and they're allowed to go through it, but they can't mess with the cabins or anything. So he just likes somebody to, and Dan Haynes also does it too, but
Oh, Pole Creek is up Liberty?
no, separate. Do you know where the town of Duncan is? The old town of Duncan?
I think so.
So it'd be straight east of that, about 4 miles.
Okay.
There's some cabins and
But
stuff.
like, the place Dan stays, is that?
That's Liberty. He
Okay.
caretakes both,
Okay,
and that's private also.
right.
Does
it's
Hannah still
private
own
land.
Liberty?
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought she did. They used to have Lorraine Fox Davis and her husband put together a camp for young people based on Native American
Rediscovery of Four Corners.
Rediscovery Four Corners, and Hannah let them use Liberty to do that. And it was very, very active for a number of years. Turned out a bunch of good people, and it helped a lot of young people.
The charter
And not
school.
only native kids, but other kids too, and it went on. I've written about it in my
What was it called? Rediscovery Four Corners?
Rediscovery Four Corners.
Did you ever get involved with that?
Mm-mm.
The charter school just took the high school kids up there for 3 or 4 days.
Oh, they did, okay. So there must still be cabins up there or
Well,
whatever
Dan, there's people that, yeah.
that are caretaking it.
The big lodge fell down, or is falling
Oh,
down.
it did, okay.
I mean, you can see it, but I usually want to walk in it, it's still there.
I just want to mention this to Shawn. I was interviewing Lorraine and David Davis for my newspaper, and your grandma, Toots always said, Whitney, you've got to go up to Pole Creek, you've got to go to Pole Creek. And so I said, okay. And I took them up to Pole Creek to interview them.
Mhm.
And we were coming back down the hill. I got home, and I was so happy with the interview and so happy to see Pole Creek. Could hardly wait to tell Toots that I had been to Pole Creek, and that was the day she died.
Is that right?
Yes.
Huh.
And Alice Coffey had left me a message on my voicemail on my machine
Mhm.
saying, we just want you to know that Toots Hollmer died. We knew you would want to know that.
Hmm.
And it just, the day she died, we went to Pole Creek.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Huh.
And oh my gosh, that was really something that day.
Did she die here?
She was living here, but she was actually visiting Jim Homer in Canyon City, so that's the hospital she died in.
Is she buried here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I went to her funeral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can't, in the history of this, don't forget there's some good people that moved in the Baca, the military people that we just talked about.
Mm-hmm. Dick Coffey.
The
Dick
Coffeys
and
and-
Alice Coffey.
Don Zine.
Yeah, and remember the Crestone 7 or the Baca 7? It was George.
George Susan.
George and Barbara Susan.
He was an ex-FBI agent or
Yeah,
something?
he was ex-FBI.
I mean, there were some really good, there were some really good old-timers that moved in here, and
Yeah,
they treated us all really good.
yeah,
So
yeah.
what I said before about him getting excluded wasn't from, I mean, it was more the administration than it was the people,
Yeah.
So there
And
was some really
and
good.
it was earlier than when we got there. When I came in the 80s, it was earlier
Mhm.
that you experienced that, and I had no idea that was your experience growing up. Oh my goodness.
And they had a dump down by actually right where the mitigation pit is. And Frank Snyder calls the Crestone Kmart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because we're poor as dirt, most of us, and here's these rich people. I mean, we'd go dig through everybody's trash and take it home. Usually took more home than you took down there.
Yeah.
It's like the original free box.
Yeah, exactly. And then when somebody burnt the dang thing, it's like, man, now everything's gone now. We got
Yeah.
to start over.
You know, Katie Snyder, what she did, when I had my gallery and my little store down at the golf course, that it was down there, it was called the Collection Connection. When I decided to close up shop, Katie decided to open up a thrift shop because there weren't any thrift shops around. And she bought all of my inventory and took it back to her house. And it's when they lived on the corner there. And she opened up a thrift shop. And Mary told me yesterday, she said, you know what? She said, I bought a bunch of stuff from Kim Snyder not that long ago, and I bet you that was some of the stuff you had. And she said it was old stuff, and I said, and it was old when I was, you know, when I had it. And, but Katie had her shop in there for a few years, you know.
Remember the Bacamart? They had,
Of course.
Where the charter school, you know, the golf course pro shop, and then east of there, that was the Bacamart. So we had 2 stores. It was big time.
That was big time.
Well,
And it's where the boot
Groceries
shop is
and-
now.
And he had a, did he cut meat too, Mr. Ledoux?
No,
No.
no. In fact, we would go in there and we would always look at the expiration
Oh, I
dates
know.
on everything, and everything was older than dirt.
He had to keep it open for so long for him. They gave him the property.
What was his name?
Ledoux. Last name is Ledoux.
Ledoux, right.
Where the library is?
No.
No,
Where the,
it's where the boot
Boot
shop
shop
is
is
now.
Oh, in that building?
Yes,
Oh.
that was originally, that was built for the Bacamart.
yeah. That was going to be a little, not a mall, but a little shopping area for that whole thing. And Mr. Ledoux was the first person to have a shop there. And it never did, the Baca Corporation decided not to pursue it, you know, or the POA, but
Whoever it was,
POA was Baca Corporation, you know, whether you wanted to think of it that way or not, but.
I think it's important that you said that. You know, I'm curious about the development of the relationship between the Baca and Townies, and the first story you were telling about the gate and how it was kind of not cool that you couldn't go there. But I really appreciate that you made the point that there were some wonderful people living out there.
No, there was. I mean, I if we would have called up Dick Coffey, I mean, we didn't know him that well at the time, and could, you know, go, you know, but and they had gold mine tours, you know. But as a Crestone kid, we got real good at sneaking in there. There's new salesmen and say, well, our folks are thinking about buying land, and they'd take us up to the gold mine tour, you know, and you know. But we would never got to go ever if we couldn't say we was somebody else. I'm sure they knew who we was.
John Mueller and I used to take tours up there.
Did you used to do that?
I did everything with a lot of people, but yes, we used. And the first time I walked in that in the mine and saw that big vein in there, oh my gosh, that had never happened before. You know, it was really something.
Do you remember the rodeo?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
What was that all about?
They had rodeo grounds out there behind the soccer field.
Behind where my shop?
Yeah, just east or west of your shop out there, and had big bleachers. And for 2 or 3 years, do you remember this? It was before you came.
What I remember is that by the time, I think they had one road, they may have closed it before we got here, but my former husband, Michael Strong, broke a horse or two for Hana.
Well, they'd let the cowboys use it for roping practice, but yeah, the real rodeo
But the
grounds.
real rodeos, I never saw.
2 or
I
3
think I
years.
saw maybe one, and it was almost already closed, but they had one more rodeo or something, and they didn't. I mean, it wasn't advertised.
Well, it was a big deal when it was going.
Yeah.
Did you go to them?
Yeah, oh yeah, we went to them. I mean, you had to pay to get in, so they'd let you do that, you know. But my cousin John and I were up North Crestone fishing, and we was walking down. You know, when you're kids, you fish or go in the mountains or something. And we looked up a tree and we couldn't believe it, and there was a monkey up a tree. you know.
Oh my gosh.
And it was one of the rodeo clowns taking his monkey for a walk, and it's up in the tree, and we're like, holy mackerel, what is this, you know?
That is fabulous.
But
I
yeah,
love
it was a big deal, and we took down a lot of when they took the bleachers and sold them, but a lot of the fencing is at the stables now, the metal fencing. That's where it ended up.
Was it a good rodeo?
As a kid, the clowns were great.
They bring clowns in from somewhere.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was like the Stampede. I mean, it was a big deal. I mean, they tried to promote. The Baca was really trying to promote this as big as they could in any way they could.
So it was a Baca rodeo, not a ranch rodeo?
No, it was Baca. It was a Baca. They had gliders. They'd bring in the glider groups, and they had the airport. Of course, they had the airport out there, and they had regular planes, you know, commercial planes that landed there. I don't know if it was daily or
on the
weekly.
ranch. It was on the ranch.
Yeah, it's still there.
It's
the
still
strip's
there.
still there. And so they would take the gliders up and take them around. They had hot air balloon weekends, you know, where there'd be 20 balloons up in the air.
It almost sounds like there could have been 1,000 kids with their jaws wide open seeing all this spectacular stuff, but it was just the two of you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, there were some kids with the construction workers that come in, but they wouldn't stay long. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't ever put names on most of them. But
And in those days, some of the Baca kids, like the Caverleys, but they lived here on the corner. And, you know, so there were some kids that came during some of those times.
the Cavs were a little later.
Yeah, the Caverleys.
But also what we're not saying is a lot of the kids that came didn't send their kids to Moffett. They went to Swatch.
Oh.
Even the Snyder kids went to Swatch.
That's right.
So a lot of the kids that, I know there are some that live down there where Scott Johnson is and stuff, and I think so we didn't have any interaction with them at all, so.
Oh my gosh.
How old
Well,
were you when the Snyders came?
We knew Snyder's when they still lived in Alamosa, and then Katie was my school teacher, my first grade teacher, I believe. And Frank worked for public service before he had an accident in public
Oh, I
service.
know.
But it was a big deal on the playground because Frank would always make sure that helicopter when they was checking lines would fly over the playground. And once he landed out there, you know, there's a kid and there's a helicopter land, that's a big deal,
Yeah.
you know. But
So when he showed up in town, you already knew him?
yeah, we knew him. I mean, I was young, but we knew him. But yeah.
Was that a shift when they showed up?
Well, he was still working for public service. It wasn't like, it was just some more people in town. They didn't like start a business right then or anything, you know. And like I said, the kids went to Swatch, so even though Katie taught at Moffett, Melanie and Shelley and Kim all went to Swatch. So, but speaking of a helicopter, we had a game warden in town, Charlie McCormick, who lived where the town hall is now, it's an inn now, San Cristo Inn or something. That was Charlie McCormick's house, and he was an ex-police officer, but he was game warden later. And the Bighorn sheep had lungworm, so he would go ride with them up, and they would, you know, go check the sheep or put medicated salt blocks, and they'd land up there behind my house. And I was a little kid hiding in the bushes watching the helicopter land, you know, because I was, you know, there wasn't nothing else going on. There's a helicopter, let's go look at it.
I want to ask you about the bighorn sheep. I have not seen a bighorn sheep in years.
Well, the population declined, but I hear the last count they're increasing pretty good again. So.
Really?
I see.
Okay.
I see him on the way up to Little Lake.
You do?
There's a salt lick up
Okay.
on the road too
Yeah,
that they
that's where I
like.
see him.
Okay. We used to just be able to see them if we go up to the campground. You know, they'd be right at the campground.
Right.
What do you call the flat mountain up there?
I call it Crestone Peak. But then I have to tell people, you know, you got to say, which is Crestone? Okay. Are you asking an old timer or are you asking what it says on the map? You know?
Matt and Johnny were talking about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to say that because Bob King said that was one of the last ones that were mapped. And when they got up there, they swapped the names and nobody fought it enough to, you know. So that's what I tell them. I say that was.
Have you been up there?
You know, I'm not a peak bagger, but I climb a lot, but I don't have any reason to get up. I mean, there's not a canyon or a lake or a ridge I haven't been on from Hayden Pass to, you know, Mosca Pass, but for me to stand in line to get up on top of Crestone Peak on a weekend, no, I don't. Because it's a line.
Yeah.
So.
I've never been up. I've been over, but not up.
See, Bob King, when I was a kid, he was my mentor, because I'd go down and say, well, Bob, you know, because he was an old miner and he loved that old history stuff. And, well, where could I go to find, and he'd say, well, go up this ridge and there's an old cabin up there with a set of bellows in it, you know. And, you know, and I'd pick his brain every time, you know, and he sent me to more old places that I can even tell you about. But he really knew the mountains, you know, Bob did. He's a good guy.
He was a miner?
A hobby miner. He was more of a carpenter around, but he had a mine claim up Cedar Gulch, actually, in fact, over by Rio Alto. Yeah, you know, that way. But, you know, I don't think he ever really worked for a big mine, but he prospected.
Do you know who his parents were?
Felice was the mom, and I knew Felice. And I don't know if it's Ed King, maybe was the dad. He died way earlier. But that's...
Did you know a Molly King?
No.
Okay. I knew her, she lived in Monte Vista, and she kept talking about Ed King up here.
Maybe that was...
And it seems like she told me who he was at one time, maybe a cousin or something like that. But she said when she was a kid that she'd spend a lot of time up here.
It probably was...
But she was in Monte Vista, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, when we're talking about mines, that as you're going up South Crestone and you pass the Teton graveyard, the road bends to the left or to the right, but if you go to the left, it takes you to two mines up there.
Yeah, that place is nuts.
The Pelican and the Garfield.
The raspberry bush.
And all the choke cherries.
Yeah.
Well, the Pelican and the Garfield were mined before my grandma's dad and grandpa bought it, but so they bought it back, and they bought them two mines probably early 1900s, 1920-ish. And grandma worked in, she packed ore out of that mine. She mucked ore out of that mine. So.
And you're saying Bob's mom was Felice?
Felice.
And you don't know the dad's name? Does that mean she raised those 10 kids?
I think maybe they were older. Bob never left home.
Okay.
But I think they were old enough by that time.
He stayed the whole time?
Yeah. She died when they were living together, and he stayed in the house. I don't think he never married, never moved out, I don't believe. He went to the military. But
Did you ever try to help him put the siding on that house?
Bob didn't want help.
I know.
Bob did not, I mean, he'd help you, but he didn't want help.
I was probably, I can't remember how old I was, but I totally drove over there and offered to help for free. Because he was up on that scaffolding, putting that siding on, 2 boards at a time. But he said no.
He was afraid somebody was going to fall and hurt themselves and sue him or something. Not that he didn't even know you, but he didn't know, or maybe he did. But I'm just saying, it wasn't just you. I think it was anybody.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
He just was afraid, But he was a good guy, and he did know we lost a lot of history when Bob.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that too. I've been wanting to ask people if they can remember like a hero type figure from when they were kids, and it sounds like maybe Bob was.
Yeah, Bob was. If you wanted to know something about the mountains, he was it. He
Was
was.
Jack Harlan part of that? Would Jack Harlan be a part of a hero thing? Or?
Maybe, but you got to remember, Jack was my school teacher forever.
Okay.
So you kind of put them in a.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
He was a bus driver, and he kept the school bus at his house, and I was the first stop. So he always stopped and picked me up, and of course I was the last stop,
Yeah.
And then every Friday he gave everybody a stick of gum or a package of gum, But I got 2 because I was in there first. He gave me one. But
He taught here too.
probably did. Probably did.
Yeah.
Did Toots graduate from here?
She
Do you know
went
if,
here,
or
but
she went here?
I don't know that Grandma graduated. Mom went to school here, but then she switched to Moffat.
Okay.
So, but
Well, I know Henry Lamb and Mabel and Jane all went here, and I think they graduated here, if I'm not mistaken.
I think Grandma had to quit to work. I think she always told me
Okay.
she had to quit school to go to work to help support the family. If I'm not,
Yeah.
I may be talking out of turn there, but you might ask. Jim or Tom or whoever, if you have somebody in here asking that, but I don't think she graduated. Might have.
Yeah.
Do you have any hopes for how Crestone grows or what Crestone looks like in the future?
I don't want to see Breckenridge. I want to see part of the history still here, is what I want to see. I don't know that Breckenridge doesn't, but it's like I'm doing my own little projects to kind of keep, you know, I like to see slow growth because I don't like change as much as probably some people, but it's going to change. Everybody knows that.
How do you feel about how it has changed now? How do you feel about the town now?
Oh, it's fine. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes when I have to pull a trailer through the narrow streets in town, I wish there was a bypass where I could like go around and not have to worry about all the
People?
yeah, well, and you can't
the
make
cars,
corners
and the cars.
holy
Yeah,
mackerel,
I know.
you know. I keep thinking I'd make a toll road. I bet I could make money. I've thought of that so many times coming home. If I made a toll road, of course the businesses wouldn't like it.
What kind of qualities do you think are missing in the current state of community versus how it was?
You know, that's hard to say because, you know, growing up, there wasn't this big get together. You know, we didn't have a Christmas party, but you'd always, you know, I remember walking down in the snowstorm to see Lucille Customeyer, you know. I mean, everybody just kind of went over to their houses and they didn't Facebook and they didn't, you know, everybody kind of looked out for everybody when they needed it. You know, and I don't know if we have that or not anymore as much as we could, but I don't even know how you get instilled in values in people. If they don't have it, they don't have it. But
What about advice for newcomers?
stay out of politics.
Absolutely.
I mean, at least if
any
you,
politics.
even if you got to get in them, if it's local politics, stay here for a couple of years before you bail in and, you know, see the way things really work, because you might be changing it into what you just left, and you left it because you didn't like it. You know, I see that on the board, the people that I work for, that just sit back and maybe there's a reason why things are happening the way they're happening, and maybe there's a logical reason for it. And if it needs change, it might need change. But don't, you know, it's almost like you need to have a gag order the first year while you're on a board.
No starting of committees.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. But if people have asked me that, what's advice? I said, well, stay out of the politics because it sours people. Some people can't just be on a committee, but they live that world and they're sour about this and sour about that.
My mom was president of Junior League in Oklahoma City, and I went to a meeting with her one time, and I did not know what a committee was. And on the way home, I said, Mom, what is a committee? And she said, honey, a committee is made up of 3 people, 2 of whom do not show up.
That's about
and
right.
I thought, yeah.
Well, I was talking to somebody earlier who said they thought that the future growth needs to be wisely managed, and I took that to mean by some sort of authoritarian, you know, like a town governance or something like that. But how does that fit in? You know, because there's on one hand staying out of politics and trying to tell people what to do,
But
then
you just can't sit on your hands and let it happen and hate it. I see what you're saying. I don't know, when I say stay out of politics, I guess, actually who I was told this to last was Ralph Abrams, and he was the mayor. But I think some people can be in politics and still have a normal life and you know, but some people, it's their world and it's you know, but you're right, you do need to do some things.
I think agenda has a lot to do with it, to not have a strong agenda,
Right.
to wait for the people to tell you what they want, rather than have an agenda that you want to force on the people.
No, that's a great.
Yeah.
And that's one of the funniest parts about Crestone Baca is that in town it's mostly old timers. Not as much as it was, but you know, maybe we have 100 people who have opinions, and they're so vastly different than the 2,000 opinions in the Baca that come in and spend their money in town.
Right. Okay, here's my opinion. don't ever join the Crestone and Baca, because we would be this much vote in this many people, and that's what scares me to death. I mean, I work for them, but I'm just saying, I think we would be outnumbered, and that's why I don't want that.
No, I think each organization, each town has its own individual place, and we need to learn to live in peaceful coexistence with our neighbors, and we are neighbors. Crestone and Baca are simply neighbors. We're not one.
Do you think that people are acting that way, like it's us and them? I don't think it is anymore. The Crestone and the Baca, because most people in the Baca say I live in Crestone.
Yeah, well, we say that on the most part because that's where our post office is. Oh, one thing about post office too. I remember when I first moved here, when Mr. Williams was postmaster, and they were talking about closing the post office here. And we'd all have to go to Moffett and pick up our mail. And the Aspen Institute and Jack Harlan asked the Aspen Institute if they would contact the post office service and write a letter in support of the Crestone post office. And of course they did. And then they stopped talking about it. But they were talking about closing the Crestone post office.
Do you remember, speaking of Jack Harlan, they brought the Dalai Lama or somebody up to meet him? And I guess nobody was supposed to touch him. And he rose up there and shakes his hand, and everybody just about fell over because I guess you don't touch this guy. Is that right? Did I remember that right?
Well, it's kind of that way, except the Dalai Lama, it was... I remember that, and Jack Harlan was talking to Hannah after that event, and Hannah said, well, Hannah, well, what do you think about the Dalai Lama? And I'm not sure it was the Dalai Lama, it may have been a Rinpoche. But anyway, Jack Harlan said, I'll take the Buddhist anytime over any New Yorker or Texan. And so, he was, I just loved Jack. He was so wonderful. But...
and don't forget the Pickets, the Prevention Old Timers.
Oh, the Pickets. Oh, I forgot about them. And Pearl.
Pearl and Skid.
Pearl Henderson.
Yeah, and Skid, her husband.
And I couldn't remember his name, yes.
That's where, Pearl and Skid is where the brewery is now.
Yeah.
I guess that's why it's Pearl Park.
Yeah. And they had that little white house with the little white picket fence around it.
And the sign that said Skid Row and Pearl Harbor.
That's right, Skid Row.
He came up here. He took pictures for schools, traveled around, and from Enid, Oklahoma, I think. And he would come up here and had a little Volkswagen van and take that. I mean, way up past where the trailhead is now and fish. That's what he loved to do and fish. And she made Rice Krispies treats as well.
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
Yes, she did. She gave us Rice Krispies at when we would sing for them, Christmas carols.
And then the Pickets, where the mayor lives now, down
that's
below in
wonderful.
Kyrina's house. They actually had that house built. The little house below it, which was the office, I can't think of the old timer's name, but the lumberyard was there too. That's what that one building was, where looks like there's lumber store there. That's what it was. But the whole guy that was there way before the Pickets, this is reminding me of a story. They actually burned him in effigy because he was, I think he was fighting over the name of the peaks. Even back then, he was big time over that, and he did something.
The Pickets were here then?
No.
Oh.
No, but I'm just that reminded me of the story of the house.
Oh, okay.
The Pickets
Okay.
knew my relatives in Las Cruces, and
Okay.
they come up here in the 70s
Okay.
probably, and they both passed away when they owned the house.
Yeah.
So they were really good. They were really good people. He was a state treasurer for New Mexico or something like that, and she was a school teacher.
I think she was.
Yeah, they were really good people.
They were good
Are
people.
we timing out here?
I wonder what time is it?
We've got time left, we got 50 minutes left, but it's up to you when we got our next people.
Oh, what time is it?
Oh, that's a good question.
It is 1:15.
Oh, okay,
So we're about done.
sure.
Oh, whatever you wanna do.
Noel's gonna show up here in a minute. Noel Harlan.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
You got Noel to come back.
Yeah.
Good.
And Edna
King?
Bennett's coming tomorrow. Edna King. Yeah.
Mhm.
Sandy's coming this afternoon too.
Good. Well, I'm glad you're doing this.
Thanks.
History's a
Thanks
I
for
think
being
it
a
is
part of it.
wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful.